The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sharon Dooley. I'm going to be the moderator today, and I think you're going to like this presentation. I saw Grant do it at Summit, and I learned a great deal. It's about being the DBA of the future, a world of on-premise and cloud. Now, my PowerPoint is not cooperating. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Dell Software, who provides us with the funds so that we can have the raffle every time we meet, and keep track of the SQL Saturdays. They happen all over the place, and this is just a list of a few of the upcoming ones, and they're free one-day training events. You might have to pay $10 for lunch, but you might get a free lunch. Can't promise. It varies from location to location. We used to give a free lunch in Philadelphia, but it got to be too expensive, and so we make people pay $10. There are a lot of past virtual chapters. I urge you to stay in touch with them. You can find many chapters most of the chapters are in English, but there's a couple of chapters that have their presentations in other languages than English. This is a list of all the virtual chapters. All you have to do is go to www.sequelpass.org and sign up, and you'll get announcements from them. They'll put you on the mailing list for the chapter. PASS does have an outstanding volunteer program, and they're trying to recognize one volunteer each month, and you can submit anybody you think should be recognized to the email address shown on the screen. It's volunteer recognition at sequelpass.org. And coming up in May in San Jose, there will be the second Business Analytics Conference. If that's an area that you're interested in, it's an event you'll want to attend. And remember, PASS membership is free, and we have connections at LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and there's a PASS blog. And I'm really proud to introduce Grant Fritchie. He's the SQL Server MVP with over 20 years experience in IT, and he's worked with SQL Server since SQL Server 6.0 back in 1995. I've got him beat because I've been working with it longer, but he's not as old as I am. He's also done application development and written some books, and he currently works as a product evangelist for Redgate Software. And what I'm going to do now, Grant, is make you a presenter, and you can show your screen and do your thing.
Great, thanks very much. Okay, should be there. It's actually the Summit title screen.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, cool. All right, just before we get going, I just like to put up my contact information. You already saw an About Me slide. Great, 20 years experience, more, and, you know, not that big a deal. But if you have questions, I want you to be able to get in touch. So here's my Twitter handle, my email address, my LinkedIn address, and my web blog. So please, 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 if you've got questions, get in touch. I will do my best to answer them. That's all I can say. Here's the thing. Change is inevitable. It is coming. It is going. There's nothing we can do about it. It's just going to happen. In my lifetime, I have known people who were doing exactly this kind of work. They spent their day on the south side of a northbound horse, right? Or actually, it was a mule, but either way, you get the idea. This, in my lifetime, this was work. This was how things were done in some places in the world. Probably it's still being done this way in some places today. But everything is shifting. We are getting to the point where things now are going to be automated, where we are looking at a whole new future. Yeah, farming, cool stuff, right? Interesting stuff. But you're a DBA, and the future is changing for you as a DBA too. You just can't avoid it. You're crazy to try. In fact, what you should be doing is embracing it. Get behind it, understand it, wrap yourself around the emerging technologies, figure out where they are applicable to you, where they are going to help you, where they're going to hurt you, but get in those new technologies and do it now. Now, I don't care which new technology you use. When I'm talking about it, I am talking about clouds type stuff. Amazon Web Services is awesome. It just so happens I'm not working in Amazon Web Services. I'm working with Azure, and I work within the Windows Azure stack. In addition to all the other database stuff that I do, I am also working within this area. This slide is actually a little out of date. They've actually added a couple of new services, and there's some new data centers that are not represented here. I need to get a more updated slide. But this is Azure. And the thing to think about is Azure is extremely deep and wide. There is a ton of stuff. It is not simply virtual machines. It's also not simply other types of data storage. It's got networking, virtual networking. There are app services, computing services, and it's a completely expandable infrastructure spanning the globe. And as I said, there are more data centers available than are shown here, and more opening. There are several coming. So that it's a constantly growing and expanding thing. And oh my gosh, it's just amazing. You need to get involved with it. But here's the cool bit. You don't need to replace your existing mechanisms with Azure. What you need to think about is where Azure can expand on what you do today. The last thing you want to do is try to say, okay, well, we're going to throw everything away and go on this whole new venture. There are definitely companies that can do that. There are companies that should do that. But most people are going to arrive at a hybrid point. They're going to have some Amazon stuff. They're going to have some Azure stuff. And then they're going to still have on-premises database. Absolutely. But let's talk about the future. Let's talk about the expanded sets. Now, I am a data pro, and so I do tend to work in data. It's just something I've been doing for a long time, not as long as Sharon, as she's already pointed out, but longer than most people. And so I kind of focus there. I do focus on data. Now, data comes in two flavors, at least two, relational and non-relational. Now, I'm going to spend a bit more time talking about the relational data, and we're going to drill down on the mechanisms available. But I do want to point out that there are plenty of non-relational data management tools available to you in Azure. We do have HD Insight, which is Microsoft's implementation of Hadoop, which is, Hadoop is this amazing mechanism for doing data collection, a very, very expandable capacity for gathering structured and semi-structured data, so you pull it in fast. It's great. They've also got this complete NoSQL solution. It's what they call tables. Unfortunate name, but it is an ID value pair. mechanism for collecting the information. And then they have blob storage, which is just raw storage of whatever, right? XML, video, audio, I don't care what you're cramming in there, go for it. You can put anything you want into it, and it's really, really inexpensive. The blob storage is shockingly inexpensive, and we're going to talk about some places where you might want to use blob storage. But what I really want to do is drill down and focus on relational data structures, because relational data is where I've made my living. Microsoft has indirectly been paying me a paycheck for many, many years, and I appreciate it. So we're going to talk about some Microsoft technologies. Now, what they've got here is infrastructure as a service. Infrastructure as a service is the SQL Server in a Windows Azure virtual machine. That's a lot of words. Let's just say really, really simply, it's a VM. That's all it is. It's a virtual machine. It's a virtual machine that's hosted. If you host with some third-party product provider right now, this is no different. If you're using VMs on Amazon, this is really no different. It's just a VM. That's all it is. It's a virtual machine. But because it's a virtual machine, you get to do what you want with it. You get very fast uptime, you get very flexible mechanisms, and it is a VM. So every single thing that you can do today in whatever methods that you're used to working with, you can do it going forward because it's just a virtual machine. We'll talk about it some more. The other one, the one that's problematic for a lot of people, is platform as a service, which is what is now called the Windows Azure SQL Database, WASD. Used to be called SQL Databases or Azure Database, and it's now Windows Azure SQL Database. This is, I say it over and over again this way, but I can't think of any other way to put it. It's different, right? It is SQL Server under the covers. It's just not all of SQL Server under the covers. And so you need to approach it differently. The one thing that I like to say and point out is that right in the name, it is different. It doesn't say Windows Azure SQL Server because it's not a server. This is a platform. It's feeding you Windows Azure SQL databases. This is a database management engine. It just so happens that they are SQL Server databases, and most of the stuff you're used to using are going to be there, but it is not the full SQL Server stack. And know that going in, because if you go in there and say, okay, well, where are broker services? Where's, SSIS? It's not going to be there. It is a database. It is fully managed, but it's pretty slick because it eliminates all kinds of hardware and administration costs that you would normally be paying and dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and makes them go away. It doesn't make everything go away because you're still dealing with SQL Server. You're going to have to maintain statistics. You're going to have to do all kinds of other work. But it's there, and it's this, like I say, it's a different critter. Now let's just talk about the different scenarios. What we're talking about is moving into this concept of, sure.
Yeah, Grant, I've got a question for you. Can
Absolutely.
IaaS handle hosting an application as well as the database?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Actually, this is just as good a time as any. Let me just switch over here for 1 second to my virtual machine. Now this is, you see it now?
Yeah.
So, okay, great. So this is Windows Azure right now up and running. Let me just show you virtual machines, because that's a great place to start. Now I've only got a couple running on this account. This is, right now I'm logged into my own account. I also have a production account with my company that has a whole bunch of different stuff on it that I can't show you guys. But this is my own stuff that I'm running and playing around with. Let me just show you one thing about this. If I want to create a new virtual machine, I can go in here and select from a gallery. And now the gallery, you'll notice there's Windows Server right at the top. But we've also got SharePoint Server. We've got various flavors of SQL Server, SQL Server 2014, CTP2, SQL Server 2012, scroll down a little bit more, 2008 R2, and all running at either standard or web or enterprise, and running on different operating systems underneath. This is all running on Windows Server 2008 R2. You'll also see down there at the bottom BizTalk, but it gets more entertaining. Visual Studio. You can actually spin up virtual machines running Visual Studio and do all your development online on the web, have things stored out on the internet. Oracle has a full-blown web presence. They are now in the cloud, and the Oracle Cloud, and I love this joke, the Oracle Cloud is called Windows Azure. Isn't that cool? We've also got Linux machines, Ubuntu servers, Oracle Linux, OpenLogic, anything, right? I'm just going to close this out. I'm not going to create one right now. But these are all available to you. So no, it's not just limited to databases. It's extremely expandable. It covers a lot of stuff. And one more thing, the virtual machines you can just create a blank virtual machine and then do all your own installs. Does that answer that question, you think, Sharon? Okay.
Seems
We'll keep going.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, cool. We'll keep going. So I am going to talk a little bit more about the Windows virtual machines real quick. I'm also going to talk about some of these other topics because these are all part of having this ability to do hybrid work, right? Don't think of it as either I'm all local or I'm all on the cloud. It's crazy to take that approach. Think about it as a hybrid, as a mix, as one more tool in your toolbox so that you can do things like backup to the cloud. You can do the Windows Azure SQL database in places where it makes sense. You can use high availability on cloud stuff, and you can just literally extend your on-premises applications. Let's just drill down a bit on it more. The virtual machine is great because what it's doing is it's lowering the cost of ownership of machines because you are no longer going to be required to maintain these servers. Someone else is going to do it for you. You don't have to have fire retardant systems and multiple power redundancies and all these other things because it's all going to get done for you. And so that's going to lower the cost of your applications. The beautiful thing, though, is it's a Windows virtual machine. If you're, normally I would ask for a show of hands, but I'm not going to right now because I can't see them. I'm sure that most of you out there, if you're looking to be, SQL Server DBAs, you're already administering SQL Server in some capacity, and so probably you have Management Studio and you're running it. Guess what? You can run Management Studio on these virtual machines or run Management Studio locally and connect out to these virtual machines. Tom Larock just put up a great blog post on it recently at SQLrockstar.com. So there's just no reason why you can't do it. It's SQL Server, right? I mean, if you know SQL Server, you can do SQL Server. You want to do business intelligence out there on the web? Great. Set up this SQL Server instance, install SSRS, install SSAS, and go to town. All of the security stuff that you're used to having, you've got. The high availability can get set up so you can actually fail over between machines on the cloud if you want to. It's SQL Server. I mean, there's just no other way to describe it. Because it's SQL Server and because it's a virtual machine, it gives you complete control over how things are running. You can do Active Directory integration so that your local logins also connect you out to an external networks on the cloud. There's no reason why you can't have those kinds of mechanisms. And because it's a fully managed infrastructure, Microsoft is supplying a service level agreement for the virtual machines. Now, it's probably not quite as high as some of you would want. Fine. Don't go there, right? It's nice and simple. If you need 4 or 5 nines of uptime, this might not be for you. That doesn't mean that people who don't have even 3 nines of uptime today could not go here and benefit from it. Or places that are dealing with 4 nines, maybe or maybe not, this could be a benefit for them. You just work with Microsoft, you figure out what it is. It's a great way to get involved and get set up. The infrastructure is completely managed, so it's taken out of your hands. DBAs, that tends to freak them out, but let me ask you today, how many of you get into the server room on a daily basis? I'm sure there's a few, but most of you don't. So that means someone's already managing that part of your infrastructure. How many of you are messing with the SAN on a regular basis? There are a few, but most of you don't. So that part of this infrastructure is also managed elsewhere. So, yeah, you know, I mean, all these things are like, oh my God, I'm surrendering control. Well, it's a control that you may or may not already have in place. So I wouldn't sweat it too much. I'd be very relaxed about it. It is virtual machines. Yes, the uptime is lower than you might be able to realize on a local machine. Granted, the performance may not be as good as you get on a local machine. Absolutely granted. Understood, in fact. Plan for that, assume that, and then go forward, because not everyone needs hyper-fast systems. Not everyone needs, you know, continuous uptime. It's okay to have some downtime on some systems, and those systems are candidates for going out here to the cloud, for reducing your overhead, and for moving out, you know, outside and moving into a new hybridized infrastructure. Any questions on virtual machines before we move forward?
Grant, there's one that I think is on the whole topic. The question is, would it be accurate to say that SQL IaaS is the latest edition and that updates happen automatically?
Yes and no. Once you set up, anytime you go in there to grab one, it is the latest edition. When you first spin up a virtual machine, it will be the latest edition. Once you spin that machine up, it is yours, and it's under your management. If you choose not to patch it, there are certain patches that you will have to install, or that Microsoft will install for you, but there's certain ones they won't require you to install, and so you can let it go out of date to a degree. Because it's just a virtual machine, right? I mean, repeat after me. It's just a virtual machine. And so you're taking it under management and letting it run. By and large, though, it will be the latest stuff. And my assumption on these, depending on the system, is that you're probably going to have short lifespans on some of these machines, and so you will be constantly looking at the latest and greatest stuff when you spin it up. But again, you get to control which one you go for. You'll notice that when I was scrolling through them before, you could, you know, pick SQL Server 2008 R2 running on Windows Server 2008 R2. So you didn't have to be on a Windows 2012 box. So you've got flexibility. All right, so we'll keep going. So another thing you can do, and this is especially useful for those hybrid environments, is the ability to extend your network directly into the cloud, directly onto the Azure system. So you can set up a virtual network, and that allows you to treat those virtual machines now, those VMs out there on the Azure stack, and all the other things out on the Azure stack, the web servers, all the rest, as part of your environment. Now that expands out a whole bunch of cool stuff, because then you can get into saying setting up failover scenarios where you have a local machine and you can set up an always-on connection out to an Azure machine, and then in the event, you know, that it fails over, well, you can do some fun stuff. Let's say while it's not failed over, while it's running locally, you run it at a very minimal aspect. You know, you keep it real low key, not using much resources, and then when you fail it over, you bump it up to one of the higher and bigger servers. I'll show you how those servers are set up in just a minute. We'll go back over and play with some Azure a little bit more. But in general, the whole concept is that you can create this virtual network and just extend your network out into this other area and make it a part of what you do. So it's not, you know, a separate thing. It's actually an integrated piece of your network. Any questions on that one?
I think the slide answers it, and what you just said answers it, but there's a question about, can we add the VM to our existing domain?
Yep, you can. You absolutely can.
Okay, and there's going back to the previous question about latest version, the questioner says that he really meant the SaaS, not IaaS.
Microsoft.
So the question was, is that always if you're using a SQL Azure database,
Oh,
is
okay.
that
Well,
always the latest version, and is it updated automatically?
let me get to that in the next slide.
Okay.
That's what we call a great question. So Windows Azure SQL database. The thing about this is that it is a managed infrastructure. It's a managed platform. And that means that you will not be patching it at all. Microsoft patches it on their schedule. Now, that does mean that one of the fundamentals, and I will address this in a little bit, that you need to take into account is connectivity. You need to have good retry logic built into your applications because Microsoft can patch it whenever they want. Now, this whole thing is that it's going for availability, right? They're aiming for this being online and available. It's not necessarily performing well, although there are mechanisms now to increase the performance. The goal here is to have this thing available. And so it will be patched. It will be running on the latest machines, sort of. This is just an interesting aside. I mean, Microsoft won't tell it this way. This is how I tell the story. They're doing live development on these machines, and you can see it. But the really cool bit is that it's not the same development on all the servers. And so I've seen dynamic management views appear in the East Asia server that were not available to me in the Northeast US servers. Why? I don't know. I mean, you'd have to ask Microsoft. But what they're doing is they're doing active development. And so you can see things changing somewhat under the covers in such a way that a given area may have new stuff that another area does not. Another example was when it was under beta, the whole concept of the premium databases, the ones that have a dedicated CPU and dedicated memory allocation, those were only available in certain data centers and not others. And so again, ongoing development means that there will be some data centers that are slightly more up to date than others. By and large, the official release version is the same across all the data centers, and you can count on that. If you are doing some of the newer stuff with them and working with them on beta products, you may only be able to run certain things in certain data centers. Just plan for that. But the beautiful thing is about SQL database is not simply that managed infrastructure, which is really cool if you think about it. I mean, who wants to have to set up servers all the time? The really cool thing about it is the scalability, the completely dynamic nature of it, the fact that you can spin these things up. Now, they're limited. They're only 150 gigs currently, but you can spin up 10 of them, 20 of them, 50 of them, 1,000 of them. If you need more data, then you just shard. Spread it across those multiple databases so that you've got as much capacity as you need. If you're, I mean, the example everyone uses is collecting data from the the Super Bowl commercials or something, where the day before the Super Bowl you only need one database. During the Super Bowl you need 100 databases, and then once the Super Bowl is done you need 2 or something. You can do that with this because it's fast and expandable and contractible. Also, it is SQL Server under the covers. So what that means is that you already know most of what you need to know. You can connect to it through SSMS. You can write T-SQL queries. Almost every single T-SQL query you can think of, you can write. Every data type, with one exception, is supported. And the exception data type, I'm glad they don't support it. I've heard rumors that it might come under support again, and it kind of makes me want to cry. But the missing data type is SQL variant. I'm happy it's not there. No one should be using that evil thing. But at least currently you can't, which is great news. But other than that, it is SQL Server. It's completely and utterly SQL Server. You create a table. You use the same create table statement as you're used to creating now. It's all the same stuff. Let's just kind of go over how this works. The basic architecture
Grant, do you want to take a couple of questions?
What you've got.
Grant, do you want to take a couple of questions?
Sure, I'm sorry, I should have paused.
That's all right.
My bad.
That's all right.
I get excited about this stuff. I can't help it.
One of them should be a yes or no answer. Can you cluster multiple VMs in Azure?
Yes.
How about IOPS? Are we guaranteed the level we need for production, say 50K IOPS?
Microsoft has published what the IOPS are that they support. I don't have that number in my head, but you can look it up. Whatever that number is, that's what they support and no more. If you need more than that, don't go to Azure, right? That would be my best answer.
And one more, and this is sort of related to the question about automatic updates. I'm running the latest SQL 2014 CTE now, preparing to take advantage of updatable column store indexes. I have an Azure SQL database, but it is still 2012, and I'm not sure when 2014 will be available for early adopters so we can test on 2014 in Azure, or if column store will be available in Azure.
Well, right now, column store indexes are not available. Will they be available? I don't know. I mean, that's a part of the stack that's not currently there. For example, I know that at least short term, the whole in-memory data structures and stuff won't be in the Windows Azure SQL database. They will be available, obviously, on the VMs, but they're not going to be available in the Windows Azure SQL database. Past that, my best answer to those questions is I don't know. I don't work for Microsoft, so I've got no actual numbers there to tell you when the 2014 functionality will move over, or what pieces of 2014 functionality will move over.
Okay, and let's do one more because I think it's a yes/no. 150 GB is the max size of the database at this time, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of the WASD database, yes. The VMs are, it's, I believe, you can have up to 16 drives, and each drive can be up to 1 terabyte in size, so you can get to 16 terabytes. So that's slightly different. But right now, WASD is 150 gigs.
All right, you can go on.
Cool. All right, so let's just talk for a minute about the WASD infrastructure. Obviously, you've got a communication layer, right? It's going through TDS, the tabular data stream, through whatever mechanisms you guys use, ODBC, ADO. Have fun, right? It's no shocks, no surprises there, I hope. That then goes into the servicing layer. And the interesting thing about the servicing layer is the way it lays out these 3 little stacks, right? You see it repeated over and over again: provisioning, 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 billing and meeting, billing and meeting, billing and metering. And I'm going to talk to you some more about why that is. And then you've actually got the platform layer. Now the platform, of course, is, and then the infrastructure. Now the platform is obviously its SQL Server, but there's this SQL database fabric laid over the top of it, and a whole series of management services that Microsoft's running, and I've never seen. I would love to see it sometime, but I don't think they let people into the deep, dark, black room where everything is hidden. But it's cool stuff. Now, why have I repeated everything 3 times here? And I'll tell you. When you're looking at WASD, when you're looking at the Windows Azure SQL database, you are not looking at a database. You're actually looking at 3. You're going to get 3 databases for any given database. Again, they want uptime, they want resiliency. They're not guaranteed performance. So what they've got is they've got 3 databases running. You create a database, and it more or less creates a virtual connection to one of those databases, and it creates the other 2 databases. You insert data, it gets inserted into the first database and into the other 2, and so on and so on. And it maintains these databases. You actually get, an outage of some sort. Say they have a hardware goes bad, or they're patching a server or whatever. It will automatically fail your database over to one of the secondaries. If something were to happen to that secondary, it would fail over to the other secondary. And in the meantime, there would be other servers coming online, picking up your database, and ensuring that you have 3 databases running. You may sometimes have 4, I've heard. I don't know. I mean, I can't see any of these things. This is just, I'm going off documentation. or listening to some of the Microsoft people talk. But the whole concept is that you've got multiple databases running all the time, and it's running this sort of, I hesitate to use the word replication, but it's using a type of replication. It's not the kind that we're used to. It's not SQL Server replication. It's something else. But you can actually see it in the weight statistics. There's a REPL weight stats that you'll see. It's REPL weight stats. You see those, and it's just an indication that it's replicating the data between databases. And so this basic infrastructure is, the basic idea of infrastructure anyway, is what keeps this thing afloat and keeps you going and ensures that you've got uptime. You've got 3 databases going. Now, it doesn't ensure connectivity. So again, I can't emphasize enough, ensure that when you go to WASD, you do then set up robust retry logic on your connections. It's unavoidable. You've got to go down that road. Any questions on this? Deep level architecture, I can't discuss because I don't know. Again, I don't work for Microsoft.
Grant, one of the attendees has asked if we could hold the questions to the end because he wants to see the whole presentation. He's probably on a lunch hour.
Okay, well, we'll get through the whole presentation, I promise. But we'll minimize the questions. All right, so Azure Management Toolset. It's the tools you're used to doing, right? If you've used Management Studio, when you connect to an Azure database, a Windows Azure SQL database, or an Azure VM database, you're connecting to a database. Now, there are differences, but by and large, the T-SQL functionality you're used to, the query plans, performance metrics, all that kind of stuff are the same. You've got Visual Studio SSDT, so you can create DAC packs and do deployments. No questions asked. It works exactly the same way. PowerShell automation is completely available. I'm using a lot of it. I'm writing up an article right now that I'm very excited about once I get it all working. I'm not going to leak the information right now because I'm way too excited about it, and I don't want anyone to know until I get it working right. And beautifully, there are third-party applications out there already filling in gaps and making extra functionality available to you through these databases exactly the same as what you're used to working with. I do know a third-party vendor that has a very popular software for manipulating, say, T-SQL formatting and type ahead that actually already works with Azure, just to plug that bit without saying names. It's already working with Azure, so you guys can just go right to town on it. And then there's this whole Azure Management Portal toolset. Now let's just switch over to there for a minute. Now this is the Windows Azure portal again. And if we click down here, these are my SQL databases. Now I've got some I created during SQL Cruise and another Cruise example. I've done some others. This is my movie management database. I'm going to go ahead and click in here. And you can see information about it. Heck, you can, I'm exposing stuff. You can actually see the server on there if you wanted to. I'm going to click Manage. Now my firewall rules actually don't support the IP address that I'm running on right now. So I've got to add that to it so that it can then let me manage the server. And by the way, what you saw there was Silverlight, and that is the only place left in Azure, anywhere in Azure, that does Silverlight is the WASD databases. It's kind of a shame, but nothing you can do about it. That's how it works. All right, so you're seeing all this real time. This is not a recording or anything. I'm connecting to a WASD database. I'm running queries against it. You can see what's going on here. We can click New Query. We get an overview showing us, information that we can learn from. We can go in here into the design screen, and we can modify tables, like, say, click on the edit for this table. I said click on the edit for this table. There it goes. And then we can use this design screen to create, or modify the existing table structures, do whatever you need to do. It's the same kind of stuff as you're used to. This is similar to the tabbed thing that we have in Management Studio, but not exactly the same. So I can bounce between these different things that I've already set up. Let's look at a new query. no type ahead. So select star from dbo.agent. There's no type ahead, but I can run the query, and it returns data sets. It even gives me back messages, so I can put in, let's get this right, set statistics IO on, go. Run it again, and then the messages will show me the IO like we're used to seeing if we were running this on Management Studio. So this is pretty full, functionality. We can even get into execution plans. Let's see. So let's start from join. I don't remember my tables. Hang on. I don't remember what my tables are. Let's let's see, agent. Let's do location and location type because that'll let me to do a join. That's what I want to do. So select star from DBO dot. Never type in demos, by the way. Location, join, DBO dot, location type. Oh, as L. See, I'm used to having things do this for me. As LT on L dot location ID equals LT dot location ID. All right, I think that will work. Oops. Nope. 1 second. We'll get it right. Yeah, it is location ID. Maybe it's case sensitive. Hang on. Oh. Oh, hang on. I got it backwards. There we go. Bad presenter. Now it's running. Great. And the data comes back as we would expect. So let's take a look at the execution plan. So I picked actual execution plan, so it's executing the query. It's going to run it. And we've got a tab here for execution plan. And if you'll notice, it looks exactly like execution plans like you're used to seeing, right? 100% exact. That's a select statement, that's a nested loops join, and these are two scans, right? Everybody can see that. No, it doesn't really make sense. So let's zoom in a little bit. Oh, it was a hash match. I said loops, sorry, loops. And then two scans. There it is, select statement. And you can get the property sheets just like you're used to seeing because, in fact, this is SQL Server under the covers. These are XML files just like you're used to dealing with. You can save these out. You can even open these in SQL Centric Plan Explorer if you want. I mean, they work exactly the same. All the functionality is there. So this is pretty much what you're used to seeing. It's just in a different environment. I can take these exact same queries, run them in Management Studio, and it wouldn't change anything that I'm doing. Any particular questions on the tool set? I'm not going to get into any other demos at the moment. I want to make sure we cover deployments.
There was one.
Okay.
Can you use SQL Server Management Studio on the Azure SQL database?
Yes, you can.
And is execution plan built-in functionality?
Yes, it's SQL Server.
Okay. I think that's all on the tools.
Okay, cool. All right, so deployments, pretty straightforward. You've got virtual machines, you've got the Windows Azure WASD. Mechanisms for doing deployments are very straightforward. You can do any type of stuff you're used to. You can do new types of cloud apps. You can extend on-premises apps to the SQL database however you want to, depending on your programming ability. You can do multi-tier stuff out to the VMs. You can do development and testing on the VMs, and you can definitely do the HADR on the VMs. But the beautiful thing is that they're all, every single one of them, we're talking about deployment mechanisms, they're all deployed roughly the same way as what you deploy today. You could use PowerShell to spin up the VMs, connect to the VMs, and then use PowerShell to manipulate the server. You can use DAC packs from Visual Studio to ensure that you're moving your databases out there. And of course, you've got third-party products that work with all this stuff to do the same thing. Let's talk optimization. I love talking optimization in general, but I even more love it talking about it in WASD and the Windows Azure stack, because the beautiful thing is that traditional stuff, query tuning, indexes, database design, has not changed, does not go away, in fact, becomes more important. And we do have the ability to throw multiple servers at the issue because we can scale, right? We can shard by, and scale by sharding, split up our data amongst multiple databases, and that does make things faster. And lastly, there is a mechanism whereby you can reserve memory and you can reserve CPU power for these WASD databases, but it's through what they call premium. You just pay more. The beautiful thing about Azure, I mean, you can think of it as not beautiful or beautiful, however you like. You only pay for what you use. You do pay for what you use, or at least you pay for what you ask for, but you only pay for what you use, and so it's a great thing. But here's what I really like about the tuning. Let me just talk about it in a little bit more detail. The old stuff, the way we used to do things, back in the day, talking client server, 1997, a lot of that is now reapplicable. You want to keep your transactions nice and tight, right? Long-running transactions across the wire, long-running transactions into the WASD databases can lead to this thing called throttling. And throttling is where you use too many resources. They kill your connection. So you only move the data you need to move, right? You don't run select star on the tables. You only move the data you need. Again, classic client-server tuning. Otherwise, you can get throttled and they'll kill your connection. Only move the data when you need it. This whole thing of like, I'll just move it all down to the application, whether we need it or not. That's, it's great when you're talking about, local pipes, but when you're talking about moving it across the internet and the latency involved and the data and throttling, you don't want to do that. You want to keep it nice and tight. And finally, you want to tune queries. If your queries are really horribly badly written, I mean, and I'm talking bad. It's not, the throttling mechanism, by the way, is not, I returned 100 rows when I only needed 50. It's, I returned 100 million rows when I only needed 100. Badly, horribly written queries will get throttled. And what happens when queries are bad or horribly written and someone's connection gets killed? Oh, well, of course, they retry it multiple times, right? They'll retry it 3, 4, 5 times. Every single time it retries it, let's just assume for a second that you're running a query that moves data out of WASD, moves it out of the Azure stack. When you move data out of the Azure stack, you pay for it. You pay for that process to move it. So 3, 4 times this thing moves some of the data out of the stack, and then the process gets killed because it's using too many resources. If you tune that query, you are literally saving the company money. Money that you can measure and tell the boss, hey, I just saved us $1,000 a week by tuning this query. And suddenly you are a hero. So Azure is fun. I'm just going to keep going for a minute, Sharon. We've got a few more minutes. I've only got a few more slides. We're going to hit everything, but we can save for questions.
Go ahead. You've got to.
Great.
We can do questions after.
Right. Well, like I said, we've got a few more minutes, and I've only got a couple more slides, so we'll cover it.
Cool.
Now, the data movement, you can do complete import and export through the DAC pack, the database, whatever the heck they call it now. You can also do management through data sync, which is a tool for moving data in and out of things. And SSIS works fine. SSIS, however, I still haven't done this experiment. I need to. I have been told SSIS is a great way to get throttled. That it has a tendency to be a little chatty in its mechanisms, and depending upon how much data you're trying to move in or out, you could end up getting throttled. I have been told. I have not seen this with my own eyeballs because I haven't been trying to move data in and out with SSIS. So I apologize for not having more details in that area, but I know that reports from friends says that the SSIS is a good way to get throttled if you move too much data around, or if you do it in an inefficient fashion. So you might want to spend some time on that. So, in conclusion, the future's bright, right? There's lots of cool stuff coming. The thing is, don't look upon it as a replacement. Don't look upon it as the fact that you're no longer going to be a farmer, that you're no longer going to be a DBA. You are still going to be a DBA. You are still going to have to do a lot of fundamental work. You're going to have to tune queries. You're going to have to, build efficient, proper data structures. You're going to have to make sure that you've got statistics maintained. You will have to set up backup mechanisms. I forgot to talk about backup. Oh, silly me. I'll bring that up again here in just a second. You'll have to do all these things. And that's just assuming you're working only in WASD. If you're working in Windows Azure VMs with SQL Server, it's no different than your current job. You're setting up broker services, you're setting up, agent jobs, all this fun stuff. You absolutely are going to be doing the same job you're doing. You're just going to be doing it in a hosted VM that's hosted by Microsoft and not by someone else. It's not a local VM. It's not some other hosted VM. Microsoft owns it. Big deal, right? You're doing it anyway, so you can do it with Microsoft. But that's painless and easy. So the future is absolutely bright. Your skill set is 100% fungible. It moves straight over, right? There's a few tricks and traps you have to learn, but other than that, it's an awesome, awesome mechanism. Let me spend a minute and a half and talk about backups. VM backups, same thing as what you're doing today, right? No differences. As a matter of fact, with VM backups in 2014, you can do what's called backup to URL, or Microsoft has released a tool for doing backup to URL in 2008 R2 and 2012, and it's backup straight to a blob storage. It's nice, simple, clean. If you're doing WASD, it does not have a mechanism called backup. It does have a mechanism called export, and it has a mechanism called copy. So what you can do is create a copy of your WASD database and then export it. That is transactionally consistent mechanism for doing backups. Any other approach that you take may not be transactionally consistent, just so you know. But there are some third-party tools out there that will help you with WASD backups and management and some other stuff. One thing I would recommend as a potential mechanism, if you're doing lots and lots of WASD stuff, spin up an Azure, a Windows Azure SQL Server VM, so that you can use Agent to manage, statistics updates and all this other fun stuff on your WASD databases, because that's pretty easy to set up, the connection between what's, the VM and the WASD databases. So I should have mentioned that back in a previous slide, and I forgot. So I've caught up to myself, and let's open the floor for questions, Sharon.
Okay. The first one, there was a question about how do you monitor performance on the WASD database, but it looks like you'd have to do the same things you do everywhere else.
Yes and no. Let me. I have a whole session where I talk about performance in WASD and performance monitoring and WASD and all that fun stuff. I can talk about that for an hour, but we'll put it in a nutshell. You don't have trace, you don't have extended events, you do have dynamic management objects. So those are at least today, those are the mechanisms you have available to you. So you can use those to capture performance metrics on the queries that you have. But remember that this is a shared platform for WASD, and that means that the cache is shared and the cache is highly volatile. So you can't count on capturing all query metrics, only the ones that are longer running or more frequently called. And in a nutshell, you've just got an hour session.
We'll have to have you back to do that one. What technology is used to maintain the data across multiple databases? Is that mirroring always on?
It's an internal Microsoft thing. The only exposure that I have that I'm aware of on what exactly it is are the weight statistics, and the weight statistics start with REPL, and the Microsoft people refer to them as replication. It is not replication as we know it. It is some other technology. I don't know what it is. I don't work for Microsoft. It's an internal thing. But that is the one thing I can see when I'm monitoring my servers, is I can see the REPL weight stats, the replication weight stats.
Another question on a related topic: does the size of each replica database count against the 150 gigabyte limit?
No. Each one is 150 gigs max. So whatever size you set your database to, like my example databases are all set to 10 gigs, just because it's cheaper for me to manage. Then the 3 copies of the database are each 10 gigs. So it's technically 30 gigs or 450 gigs, up to of storage that you're using, but that's the Microsoft's internal infrastructure. The billing is per the amount of data that you store, up to 150 gigs per database.
Okay, I think this is related to the replication, mirroring, etc. Are you talking about the data sync functionality on Windows Azure Server?
That's not the replication mirroring stuff. There is data sync for doing data movement, but that's a thing for you to move data around. That is not something that Microsoft is using. Or heck, maybe they are using that. I don't know, but they don't tell us how they're maintaining those 3 databases. That's an internals thing that is not exposed.
Okay, here's another.
So any other questions on that one? The answer is the same. I don't know.
Can we roll back the service pack installed in Azure database?
Can you? Well, you can't do a service pack in Azure SQL database. Can Microsoft roll one back? Yeah, I imagine they could, but based on all the talk that I have talked, everything I've talked about, I've talked to the engineers that maintain this stuff. I've talked to the guys that man the support desk, and everything I've heard is that they've got multiple layers of testing and validation, and I would be shocked if they rolled out a service pack to any percentage, a significant percentage anyway, of the servers that they then had to roll back. I would be shocked if that happened. It's just all the mechanisms they have in place suggest that if at best they would roll a second service pack out to fix the first one. Probably. Again, I don't know.
Okay, here's another. Are the OS components of SSIS supported with the hosted SQL Server Azure? For example, FTP files triggering data import.
Yeah, all you have to do is you have to install the SSIS yourself, but it's there. Absolutely.
Okay, and SSIS
because again, it's just a virtual machine.
Okay.
Right?
And SSIS is supported in the Azure database environment.
Connections to the Azure database are supported, but SSIS is not a part of the Azure database. Remember, when we say Azure database, remember database, not SQL Server, and that will allow you to differentiate between the two. The database itself, remember, imagine a SQL database. How much SSIS support is there inside of a SQL Server database? None, right? SSIS is a separate service that's part of SQL Server. So when we're talking about the Azure SQL database, there is no SSIS there.
Okay. Let me see. I'm trying to. I know you answered this already once, I think, but what does WASD stand for?
Windows Azure SQL Database, WASD. It's just a shorthand way of saying it, because saying Windows Azure SQL Database over and over again slows things down, and it's easy to get tongue-tied.
Okay, how can you restore a WASD backup?
Okay, it's use the import process to then recreate the database that you exported. Nice and simple. And then, of course, you have to roll it back over. No point-in-time recovery is possible. It's effectively full backups only. No differentials, no nothing. It is because it's an export mechanism, not a backup, which I know freaks people out, but there it is. Now, Microsoft may or may not be working on other mechanisms, but that's what we have today.
Does backup to your URL involve any cost?
Yes, backup to URL does involve cost. The storage cost of maintaining the data on the blob storage, it's extremely low. I've got gigabytes and gigabytes up there already. I couldn't tell you exactly how many, and I pay like $1.50 a month or something. I mean, it's insanely low.
Have you experienced any noisy neighbor issue similar to Amazon Web Services' notorious platform issues?
Have I experienced it? Not yet, but it's kind of hard to know for sure. You can observe the REPL wait stats, and if you're not doing hard loads on your system, but you're seeing high REPL wait stats, that's an indication that you probably have a noisy neighbor. I haven't seen it yet, but I have had servers fail over on me, and you don't know what the cause of failovers are. Microsoft doesn't always say. There is a mechanism that you can capture some data about why it was failed over, but for the most part, if it was failed over because of a noisy neighbor, you wouldn't know that. You would just see a manual failover. And not one for service packs or maintenance issues. But that's the only, that's as close as I can get. I've seen stuff fail over, but and that I then did not know why. And that could be a noisy neighbor.
In WASD, does the 150 GB limit include the transaction log, also apply to the transaction log file?
No, transaction logs are managed differently. You do have a limit on a given transaction that will prevent you, that will cause throttling, which means you'll get killed and it'll have to roll back and all that fun stuff. So you do want to keep your transactions shorter. Right, as I said, but no, the transaction log is managed separately. The 150 gigs is data only.
Okay, can we use Crystal reports on SAP Business Intelligence with Azure DB?
Yeah, sure, why not?
That's a nice, simple, direct answer. Is SSIS from local SQL instance to direct connection to SQL Azure database available as a method to move data from local instances to the cloud?
Yes, it is.
Let me see, I got a couple more.
Okay.
So WASD databases are only in simple recovery model?
First, I don't know for sure. Second, don't worry about it. It's because it's a managed platform, it's not something that you need to sweat. You don't have a mechanism for point-in-time recovery. I know, and this is a statement from Microsoft people, they are taking their own backups of the servers, and they are taking log backups. So I think, no one has told me this, but just based on information I have been told, I am going to infer that they have these things in full recovery, and that they are capturing the logs on their own. But one, I don't know that, and two, it doesn't matter because you can't do point in time.
Can you define a maintenance window?
Nope.
How do you manage cases where a query gets killed by Windows Azure, how do you identify that it happens in real time to reprocess queries?
There is first you'll get an error. When you get killed, you'll get an error message back saying that you've been killed. Right? It'll be part of the process. So assuming you write your application logic correctly, you should get that back, and it will tell you you were selected for death, baby. That you were throttled. Secondly, there are dynamic management views inside there that let you look at throttling. I go over that in a lot more detail in my monitoring and tuning session. This is more my cheerleading session.
Is there a time delay during WASD failover?
Yes. I have seen pretty tiny ones, but I'm told you should anticipate up to 2 minutes. But I've never seen that long.
Okay.
When I've gotten kicked out once or twice, it's been. I mean, I got kicked out, I retried, I was back in.
And one last question. Oh, there's one that I can answer. We're going to work on it, Sam. He wants to know when is the performance tuning scheduled. But are my WASD databases encrypted, or can Microsoft see the contents of my tables?
Okay, the answer to both of those is yes. Yes, they are encrypted, but yes, Microsoft has the decrypt mechanisms available. They could see your data.
Okay, folks, that's all the questions we're going to have time for today. The presentation will be recorded, and it will be available on dba.sqlpass.org. Last time we had a little trouble with the presentation recording, so I can't guarantee it'll be there today. And Grant, if you send me your PowerPoint or a PDF, I can put that there as well.
Okay, I'll send that over.
Thanks. And our raffle winner is Justin Randall, justinrandall77@gmail.com, and past headquarters will let you know, be in touch with you. And thank you, Grant. That was an excellent presentation, and I learned more things that I hadn't learned the first time. And so you and I will be in touch about getting this getting the second one scheduled.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. I'm going to save all the stuff and stop the recording, and you can go enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Good. Have a great afternoon and evening, everybody. I hope it isn't going to snow 6 to 12 inches where you are. It's going to do it where I am.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Grant.